The hit came out of nowhere. 1 second. The T6 Texan II cut low over the ridgeline just east of Yuma, the desert sprawling wide and golden beneath them. The next, a hard thump slammed through the fuselage. Metal screamed. Warning lights flashed red across the cockpit. Taylor's breath caught. Then the voice, guttural, pained, from the seat behind her. I'm hit. She turned her head just enough to see Lieutenant Foster slumped forward, his right shoulder soaked in red. He tried to grab the stick, but his hand slipped. Blood was pouring fast. Oh God! Taylor gripped her own controls tighter. He mumbled again. Left side. PKM. Pickup truck. She barely processed the words. Alarms were blaring. The engine gauges flickered. Wind buffeted the canopy. Her headset crackled with static Focus. Taylor. She looked down at the instruments. Airspeed was dropping. Nose pitching too high. She pulled back on throttle. Adjusted trim. Tried to level. Her finger shook. She'd never done this solo under pressure. Not like this. Behind her, Foster gasped. You've got the aircraft. It wasn't a request. Her voice cracked. Stay with me. See ya. You can't check out on me now. He didn't answer. Taylor's mind spun. Checklists blurred in her memory. Emergency power. Fuel status. Radio backup. She toggled the UHF. Mayday. Mayday. This is Hawk 2-1. Instructor down. Under fire. No response. The channel was dead. She looked out the canopy. Below, a pickup kicked up a trail of dust. A flash. Another round tore through the wing. Just outside the fuel tank. Breathe. She banked hard to the right, using a rise in the terrain to mask their position. The Texan groaned under the stress. G-forces pinned her in place. Her boots braced against the pedals. I can't do this. But her hands kept flying the plane. Behind her, Foster coughed again. A gurgling sound. Talk to me. Just keep talking. She reached back blindly, pressed her hand against his leg. He twitched, still conscious. The altimeter dropped 4,000 feet. Not enough room to mess up. She throttled down. Trim maintenant se level. Held steady. Everything inside her screamed to panic. But she didn't. Not yet. The pickup was out of sight now. Maybe they had a few minutes. Maybe not. Stay with me. Sire. She looked at the instruments. The terrain. The blood dripping onto her boot. Okay. You've got this. You've got the aircraft. And she flew. It was barely light out when Cadet Taylor Reeves stepped onto the flight line at Laughlin Air Force Base. The sky still held that soft gray before sunrise, and the wind carried a chill that cut through her uniform. It was just past 6:15 in the morning, and the base was already humming. Ground crews moved between aircraft, instructors swapped flight plans and coffee cups. Taylor kept to herself. She always did. At 25, she was older than most cadets, with a few more years and a lot more scars. Before the uniform, she'd worked nights as an EMT in Omaha. She'd seen things there that stuck to her, things she couldn't patch with gauze. Joining the Air Force wasn't some childhood dream. It was a decision made one quiet night after watching a medevac bird disappear over the city with someone she couldn't save. She'd thought, maybe if she was the one flying next time, it'd end different. Inside the briefing room, cadets filled the chairs in scattered groups. Some joked loudly about their simulator scores. Others traded stories about check rides and instructor quirks. Taylor sat in the back, flipping through her kneeboard notes. Her hands were steady, but her stomach was tight. She'd only flown solo 3 times. Every landing still felt like a small miracle. Across the room, someone muttered something about her being the medic-turned-flyer. Said she'd probably ace the rescue drill but stall on takeoff. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. At precisely 700 hours, the door opened, and Lieutenant Dan Foster stepped in, He didn't speak right away. Just looked around the room like he was reading the weather in every face. Foster had the presence of someone who'd flown through fire. Former A-10 pilot. Multiple déploiements. Calm as stone. He was respected because he never raised his voice and never let panic land in the cockpit. His eyes found Taylor's. He gave a slight nod. Nothing dramatic. Just enough. Today's mission was a low-level navigation run over the southern desert. Windy. Dusty. Full of false ridgelines. The kind of flight where the terrain looked the same until it didn't. Foster paired himself with Taylor without saying much. Just handed her the checklist and said they'd meet at the jet by 8:30. She nodded, grabbed her gear, and headed for the line. She didn't feel ready. But then again, she hadn't felt ready for anything in a long time. The signal came across their secondary radio at 9:42 a.m. A weak transmission. Scratchy. Broken. Civilian aircraft reporting lost visual. Something about fuel running low. Maybe icing. Foster narrowed his eyes and adjusted the frequency. Could be nothing. Could be real. He turned to Taylor. Voice steady. Let's check it out. Good situational awareness drill. She nodded. Logging their position and adjusting heading. They banked east. Sun flashing across the canopy as the T6 Texan II dipped low toward a narrow valley cut into the desert floor. It looked empty. No movement on the ground. The scrubland was quiet. Then the world exploded. A burst of fire tore through the left side. A grinding metallic pop. A scream. Taylor flinched as the whole cockpit shuddered violently. Alarms howled. Her harness snapped tight across her chest. Smoke. The smell hit first. Acrid. Burning metal. She turned her head and saw Foster twisted sideways. His left arm limp. Blood soaked his flight suit at the shoulder. She shouted his name. No answer. Her hands grabbed the stick. The aircraft pitched left, nose dipping fast. Behind her, Foster groaned. Pickup. Machine gun. She didn't understand. Then she saw it. A tan pickup near the ridgeline. Mounted PKM. Muzzle flashing. They'd walked right into it. This wasn't a drill. The plane kept shaking. Her headset crackled. The terrain rose fast ahead. Pull up. Trim. Adjust throttle. She couldn't think. Only react. Beside her, Foster coughed hard. His voice came low. You've got the aircraft. Her chest tightened. He repeated it. Slower. You've got the aircraft. It's your plane now. Her breath caught. This couldn't be happening. She steadied the stick. Watched airspeed. Checked for pitch. Horizon bouncing like a heartbeat. You've got the aircraft. She whispered it back. Not to him. To herself. Then she flew. The ground still flashed with muzzle bursts. But she turned hard. Slipping behind a low hill. The T6 groaned. But held. Smoke trailed from the left side. Foster's breathing was shallow. She reached back with one hand. Touched his leg. Still there. Still alive. This wasn't what she signed up for. But none of that mattered now. It was her plane. Her choices. And whatever came next, she was flying into it, head on. The cockpit was a mess of smoke and noise. The HUD blinked in and out. A faint green flicker against the haze. Taylor's hands were clenched so tight around the stick, her knuckles ached. But she didn't loosen her grip. Couldn't. Foster's breathing was ragged behind her. Every few seconds, she heard him groan or shift. Just enough to know he was still alive. She forced herself to run through what she knew. The T6 was flying. But barely. Engine RPM was holding steady. Oil pressure looked normal. The fuel gauge showed 40%. No external leaks. But the left wing had a hole the size of a grapefruit. And they'd taken more than one round near the nose. She scanned the terrain ahead. Low ridge lines. Dried out washes. Rock formations, sharp like broken teeth. No cover if she climbed. No time to climb anyway. Keep it low. Mask the profile. Follow the folds. She remembered that Foster had drilled it into her. Terrain masking. Stay under radar. Under sight lines. She dropped the nose 2 degrees. Skimmed along the edge of a shallow valley. The wind kicked harder down here. The stick fought her. She didn't let go. Behind her, Foster mumbled. Bank right before the next ridge. She adjusted rudder. Rolled just enough to ease around the rock line. Sweat rolled down her temple. The warnings were still flashing. She reached up. Silenced one. The next came back just as fast. Not now. The T-6's body creaked under the strain of every maneuver. It wasn't built for evasive runs, but it was holding another voice in her head now. Her own. Steady. Direct. Altitude 1,000. Heading southeast. Maintain speed. She was talking herself through it. Just like she used to in the sim. Except this wasn't the sim. Static buzzed through her headset. She tried switching to the secondary channel again. Nothing. Only her own breathing in her ears. Fast and shallow. Stick and rudder. Trim. She reached for the manual trim wheel. Adjusted slightly. The nose evened out. Foster let out a cough behind her. That sounded worse. Wet. Stay with me. She didn't say it out loud this time. Just flew harder. 2 minutes passed. Maybe 3. She didn't look at the clock. Time felt wrong in here. Then she saw them. Up ahead, near the pass, another pickup. This one parked across a dry riverbed. More movement behind it. Men with long rifles. Something glinting near the hood. Maybe a second weapon mount. Hairgoot dropped. This wasn't random. It wasn't a lucky shot from some backcountry nutcase. This was planned. The first team flushed them out. The second was waiting to finish the job. Taylor blinked hard. Adjusted heading 5 degrees east. Not much, but enough to shift course. She didn't know yet where she was going, but she knew she couldn't go back the way they came. This was her flight now, and she was flying through fire. Taylor could see the truck through the haze, parked at the far edge of the riverbed, half camouflaged with brush. Its barrel angled slightly upward. Whoever was down there had been waiting. The ambush wasn't sloppy. It was coordinated. They wanted her to run. She didn't. The words from Foster's briefings rang in her head. Sometimes evasion is survival. Other times, aggression saves lives. She yanked the stick left. Hard and fast. Dropping the nose until her stomach lurched. Airspeed climbed. The T-6 groaned under the load as she rolled into a shallow dive. The altimeter spun. She adjusted the throttle slightly forward. Not full power, just enough to keep it under control. Too fast, and she'd overshoot. Too slow, and she'd be a sitting target. She lined up with the pickup. Angle of attack trimmed forward. Nose pointed straight at the target. Let them think you're armed. Let them feel it. Her HUD was flickering, but the center line still tracked clean. She held her breath. From the ground, figures began to scramble. One fell, another dove behind the cab of the truck. The barrel of the machine gun shifted, then hesitated. They didn't know what was coming. She pulled the stick back just before impact range. Feeling the frame resist the sudden shift, wings flexed. The entire aircraft jolted as she climbed out of the dive in a tight arc. The maneuver pushed her into the seat, gravity doubling for a moment before easing. Smoke curled behind her left wing. But the T-6 held steady. The distraction worked. By the time they could reorient, she was past the line of fire. She climbed to 2,000 feet, angled east toward open terrain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But she'd bought herself time. She reached for the backup comm channel and flipped the switch. Static. Then a faint buzz. She tuned it again. This is Hawk 2-1. Instructor down. Sustained ground fire. I am Zolo. Requesting immediate vector and medical evac. Her voice was calm. Even she noticed it. Silence. Then Hawk 2-1. Base ops copies. Stand by. We've got you. She closed her eyes for half a second. The first time since it began. Foster groaned behind her. She turned back to check. His chest was still rising. Slow. But there. She adjusted heading. Kept climbing. Watched the gauges. She wasn't safe yet. But she wasn't alone anymore. The runway came into view at 10:57 a.m. A narrow strip of concrete baking under desert sun, with emergency lights flickering at both ends. Base ops had vectored her to a secondary field just east of Davis-Monthan. Closest they could get with her altitude and fuel. Taylor could barely feel her legs. Her hands were locked to the controls. Sweat sliding down her spine. Behind her, Foster hadn't spoken for over a minute. His breathing was shallow, a rasp more than a breath. She dropped flaps. The response felt sluggish. She trimmed nose down, then back up to correct. Her voice cracked as she keyed the comm. Hawk 2-1 on final. Low fuel. Instructor critical. Request med team on standby. The reply came fast. You're clear. Winds variable. 12 to 15 knots cross. Emergency units rolling. She nodded to no one. Throttle to idle. Nose high. The descent felt off. Too steep. She adjusted again. Altitude still a little high. She dipped just enough. The wind kicked the left wing. The plane rocked hard. She held it. Her checklist echoed in her head. Gear down. Check. Flaps full. Trim steady. The runway rushed toward her. Too fast. Then too slow. Behind her, Foster murmured something. She couldn't make it out. Just the sound of a man still breathing. She whispered back. Stay with me. Almost there. 200 feet. She aligned the nose. Hands tight. Shoulders burning. She felt every rattle. Every creak in the fuselage. 50 feet. The ground blurred. Then slammed. The main gear hit first. Hard. The bounce lifted them just slightly before she pushed the nose down. The T-6 grunted against the pavement. The wheels screamed. The brakes caught. The aircraft pulled slightly left. She corrected. On the edge of her vision, fire trucks and emergency crews raced alongside. She rolled out. Slowed. 30 knots. 20. The aircraft crawled to a stop. Taylor's chest heaved. For a second, she didn't move. Just listened. No alarms, no warnings. Just wind pressing against the canopy. She turned, reached back. Foster was still alive. Barely. She keyed the backup. Hawk 2-1 stopped. Instructor critical. Request immediate medevac to rear hatch. The silence filled her headset. Then static. Then confirmation. Roger that. Coming in now. She looked at her hands. Still shaking. She hadn't realized she was crying. She did it. Not clean. Not perfect. But they were on the ground. Alive. The sun was high over Laughlin Air Force Base as families filled the bleachers. Uniforms caught the light. And the loudspeakers hummed softly in the background. It was just past 10:30 a.m. Cadet Taylor Reeves stood in formation. Her flight suit sharp. Boots polished. Cap squared. From a distance, she looked like every other graduate on that field. But up close, there was something in her eyes. Something keyed her. Something earned. 2 months had passed. The bruises were long gone. The scars beneath her collar faded. But the weight of that flight, of what she'd carried through those desert skies, never left. She hadn't flown since the landing. She'd studied, trained, waited, recovered in silence. And now she was here. Lieutenant Dan Foster sat in the front row. A cane balanced across his knees, his arms still in a sling. Healing slowly. He hadn't returned to flight status yet, but he was present. That mattered more. When Taylor's name was called, she stepped forward. Her get smooth. Precise. She saluted the officer at the podium, her hand steady. But then there was a pause. The commanding officer turned to the crowd and cleared his throat. He said that sometimes a cadet doesn't just graduate. Sometimes they teach the rest of them what leadership really means. He spoke of courage, of instinct, of a day in the desert when protocol fell away and only one person could act. Then he announced it. For heroism involving voluntary risk of life outside of combat, Cadet Taylor Reeves is hereby awarded the Airman's Medal. There was a second of silence, then applause. Taylor didn't move at first. She just looked down. Her jaw clenched tight. She hadn't done it for this. She'd done it because there was no one else. When she stepped forward again, Foster rose slowly from his chair. No notes in his hand. No script. He said that Taylor didn't just save his life. She took control when no one expected her to, that when the sky was falling, she didn't ask permission. She flew. He said she didn't just fly the aircraft. She brought them both home. The field was quiet again. Taylor raised her hand once more, saluted, and this time, when she turned, she let herself breathe. The classroom was quiet, except for the low hum of the projector, the kind of hum that fades into the background unless you're nervous enough to notice it. It was just past 7:40 a.m. The chairs were filled with fresh cadets, all in pressed uniforms, all pretending they weren't terrified. Taylor Reeves stood at the front of the room, a new gold bar pinned just above her heart. Her voice hadn't spoken yet, but her presence already held weight. In her hand, she held a flight helmet, scuffed, worn. The edge of it still bore a faint, reddish mark, barely visible unless you knew what it was. She looked at them young, sharp, uncertain, and took a quiet breath. She told them she wasn't here to talk about engine starts or landing patterns. They'd have manuals and instructors for that. She was here to talk about the things no checklist could prepare them for. She told them about fear, not the kind you feel before your first solo, the kind that wraps around your throat when you hear ground fire punch through your fuselage, when your instructor is bleeding behind you, when you're 25, alone in the sky, and every second feels like a coin toss. She admitted she wasn't ready. She hadn't earned her wings yet. She hadn't memorized half of what she should have. But no one else could fly that plane. No one else could bring them home. And so she did. She watched their faces shift. Curiosity, doubt, something else too. A young cadet near the back raised his hand, voice just above a whisper. Was she scared? She smiled, gently, looked down at the helmet in her grip. Yes, every second. But courage, she told them, isn't about being fearless. It's about flying anyway. She said being a pilot wasn't just about knowing how to fly. It was about knowing who you're flying for, about keeping calm when everything falls apart, about making decisions you don't feel ready to make. She paused, let the silence sit. Then she told them the most honest thing she knew. One day, it won't be training anymore. The sky will feel different. The silence will be heavier. And something will happen that no one prepared you for. And in that moment, it won't matter if you're ready. It will matter if you stay in the fight. If you protect your crew, if you bring everyone home. She placed the helmet down on the desk, looked them in the eyes. That's what it means to lead.